Welcome to Psych Talk. I'm your host, Dr. Jessica Rabin, a licensed clinical psychologist. If you are a mental health professional, student in the social science field, or just interested in psychology and mental health, this podcast is for you. Although topics discussed on this podcast are similar to therapy, Psych Talk is not a replacement for therapy and is for educational and entertainment purposes only. So let's dive into today's episode. Hey everyone, welcome back to Psych Talk, and thank you so much for joining me for today's episode. Today I have a very special guest with me, Dr. Darby Bonomi, who is a sport and performance psychologist. So Darby, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you, Jessica. I'm thrilled to be here.
I am so excited for our conversation, like I said before we hit record. But before we jump into that, can you introduce yourself, a little bit about your background, what you do, and anything else you want to share about yourself?
Sure. Well, I have been a psychologist, a practicing psychologist for 35 years almost. And for the last 10 years, I've been a sport and performance psychologist, working mainly with equestrians and entrepreneurs and a lot of professionals. In the years before that, I was a clinical psychologist and I am a Freudian psychoanalyst. So I spent almost 2 decades in clinical work and in teaching at the Psychoanalytic Institute and also at various hospitals in San Francisco. So I've done a lot of things in my career.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so you just mentioned you're a sports and performance psychologist. Can you define for listeners what that is? Because I feel like that might be an area people aren't as familiar with. And then your
Yeah.
journey into really working with high achieving women, which is what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, sport and performance psychology is Division 47 of the American Psychoanalytic or Psychological Association, excuse me. And so, that is a name that we call ourselves, those of us who work in sports and performance. I shortened the name myself because I think it's redundant. I think performance is performance, whether it's in sport and also I think, right, if you're right, we're working for high performance, peak performance. If you have peak performance, or to get peak performance in the sports arena, you really need peak performance all around. It's
Hmm.
really right. You don't have someone functioning at a low level who's functioning up here in their sport or other performance, whether they're a
Hmm.
surgeon or an actor or whatever. So I think sport and performance is redundant. It's also a mouthful. So sometimes I use the term and sometimes I just say, look, I'm a performance psychologist.
Hmm.
Um, so that's my long answer. How did I get into doing this? Well, that's an interesting question. I didn't take the direct path. A lot of young psychologists or aspiring psychologists come to me and say, how did you get to do the work? Where do I get the training? And I say, my path is very unique.
Hmm.
So how I got into doing this was, like I said, I was a clinical psychologist for almost 2 decades, took a break in my work to raise 3 kids for a few years. And then I knew I would go back into practice. I had the sense that it would be something different.
Okay.
And I am an equestrian. I am a competitive equestrian. I have been since I was young, and I took a big hiatus, to develop my career and all that, but I am currently still. And so, being around the horses and competitive equestrians, people started to ask me to help them first with their children who seemed very anxious to go in the showing. It really was something I a bit fell into because people
Hmm.
started asking me and then they asked me to help them. And so I started doing this and then researched it more, realized that I had the talent and I had a lot of the skills throughout all my training. And so put up my shingle in a different way. And it's been hugely rewarding for me.
Hmm.
And now, so how did I get into, I could keep going on, but now I work Probably 60% of my work is with professionals, like
Okay.
elite equestrians, Olympians, people
Wow.
who ride, as a profession or have equestrian businesses. A lot of people are
Okay.
entrepreneurs, so we work on their businesses and how they think about their businesses and how they think about developing their businesses. So I work comprehensively in that, not just in terms of their performance in a show
Mhm.
ring or in a sport situation. So, and so that's a little bit about how I got here. Why I wrote the book, I think is
Mhm.
what your question is. Like I felt it was time to add my words to this conversation, right? Since I
Mhm.
was a young psychologist, I've been working with smart, ambitious, lovely, bright, competitive women since the very
Mhm.
beginning. That's been my clientele, right? And so I have observed through my clinical work as a therapist and then as a psychoanalyst, as a supervisor and teacher, right? And now in this role as a performance psychologist, over and over again, these brilliant women whom I admire and help and diminish themselves,
Mhm.
overly criticize themselves, so perfectionistic, right? Getting in their way, making themselves smaller, not believing in themselves.
Mhm.
And it was time to write the book. I was tired of reading other people's words. Like, it's time to write the book from my experience.
Mhm.
And part of the book also, I share my own experience.
Mhm.
And this was a whole evolution of how this book came about. But I felt it was necessary to share some of my own experience because I am similar.
Mhm.
Right? And anyway, that's a little bit about how I came to write this book and why.
Thank you for sharing that. And for listeners, your book is called Unshrinkable: Why Strong Women Secretly Criticize, Diminish, and Thwart Themselves, and How to Stop. So I'm, and at the end, I'll ask you that too, but I wanted to make sure we threw that book
Thank you. Yeah.
title out there as well. And thank you so much for kind of sharing your journey into performance psychology. Like, one reason I love having guests on is to hear their journeys, like where they started versus where they ended up, because I think so many of us, psychologists or other mental health professionals, start thinking we're going to do one thing and end up in a different place. And you're nodding. Yes.
Yeah, no, I was going to be a training analyst at the Institute and spend all my time doing psychoanalysis and then honestly having a child changed that. Like I all of a sudden I wanted more than just one. I was just going to have one, it really changed my
Mhm.
perspective and other things too changed my perspective in my life about what I wanted to do. So, but absolutely, you don't know where your path is going to take you, and
Yeah.
that's the beauty of it, right? I was thinking of this, I was thinking of this for a certain reason today, but I was thinking that life occurs in between the adventure of life occurs in between the things that we plan.
Mm, I love that.
Right? Right.
Yeah.
So we plan all out, but then things happen. Uh,
Yeah.
and I thought of this because my son is traveling in Spain right now, and he was supposed to take a train from Barcelona to Madrid today, and something happened with the train, and there was a fire in the station. He's fine, everything's fine,
Good. I was about to
but
say, you just said fire. It's like,
yeah, no, he's fine. But then, he had to rent a car and he's driving, now he's there. And I thought, well, this is what happens when you travel. When you travel,
mhm,
you make this itinerary, you have this plan, and then things happen, right?
mhm,
And that's where the adventure starts, really. Like, what are
mhm.
you going to find? Now you're driving. Where are you going to stop? What little town are you going to have dinner in, right?
Yeah.
And right, that's the adventure. Hopefully, he took me up on this idea because he was kind of bummed that the train didn't work. I'm like, no, this is where the adventure starts. But then I was thinking, but this is life, right? We all plan. You're a planner. You've had to,
Yeah.
right? And but then things happen,
Things happen. Hmm.
and that's where the adventure starts. So
Hmm. Yeah, no, I love that perspective. And I think one thing I personally value so much about our field is there is so many options for life to happen, for that adventure. From what you said, you took a little time off to raise your kids and you knew you wanted to go back, but maybe not in the same capacity. And now you've built this, what, phase two of your career, I guess. Can I say that? Like
No, there's been a few
a
phases,
few
but
most
yeah,
recent phase.
yeah, yeah.
And I can tell you're so passionate and you are working in an arena that, and I didn't mean to use that like from an equestrian term, but like in a arena that you grew up riding, loving. So you're
Yeah.
bringing things in from a passion outside of mental health and psychology.
Absolutely. And what's really wonderful about it is I am bringing psychology into the equestrian. I mean, there are many of us now working in this space who do this, but I mean, because sports psychology has become, really, I don't know, want to say fashionable, but people have
Hmm.
understood that the right? Without the mental
Yeah,
game, there is no game, as I posted yesterday, right? There's no without our psychological health and well and proper functioning,
hmm,
right? It doesn't happen. So the
absolutely.
importance of psychology has really, been now seen, I think. But Right. So I feel like I'm bringing psychology into different areas. I mean, different, like the awareness of not only
Yeah.
of psychology, but of mental health, of the burnout, all the things, right?
Hmm.
There's so many. I mean, we psychologists, there's such need for us. And anyway, I could go on and on, but I feel like I've brought a lot of psychology into the equestrian world,
Hmm.
and also this is important. People come to me in this world because I am in the world,
Yeah,
right? They feel safe
absolutely.
because I know the horse world, I know
Hmm.
sports, I know, right? And so that makes it right. I'm accessible, and they feel like that they're not so daunted, right?
Yeah,
They can talk to me about. So I think that's also important because so many people, right, in whatever field
absolutely.
you're in, that people are afraid to come and talk to you. They're afraid, right? They're scared.
Hmm.
So.
Yeah. No, but that makes a huge difference because they know, at least on some level, you will understand because you're in that world. They're not going to have to explain to you the ins and outs of what it means to ride a horse. Like you're not having to go back to basics. Like you understand, you know, the mental game that goes into it, the physical, like all of the aspects. And this is speaking as someone who is not an equestrian, so I'm just
Yeah,
throwing things out there. But yes,
that's
I'm sure that
right.
helps.
That's
Makes you
right.
more
Yeah.
approachable.
I mean, that's part of my book, the principle of my book too, which is, look, I understand something of you because I also
Hmm.
am you. I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
you, but right there, and I think, but that helps people see, right, so that they don't
Absolutely.
idealize. And we psychologists have been in the past, in part to the psychoanalytic tradition. We've put ourselves in the ivory tower, right, and I think
Hmm.
that has really put a lot of people off. And we need to. I think we really need to be accessible and encourage people to come and get help and get treatment,
Hmm.
especially now.
Yeah,
Uh,
I absolutely agree.
yeah.
So when talking about your book, you mentioned you noticed this pattern of these high achieving women that you admire, you thought so highly of, were extremely self-critical and they diminished themselves. So opening with a big question here, why do high achieving women tend to be so self-critical and so hard on themselves? I know this one question could probably be the whole podcast
Yeah.
episode, but
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I struggle with that question every single day, right? And I could give a broad answer, and then, as you know, because you're a psychologist, everyone has their reasons. So I'll give a broad answer, and then I'll give you an example from an hour ago
okay,
of
perfect.
working with someone. And I think we as women tend to, or the patterns that I see are, we're afraid of showing our ambition, right? We're
Hmm.
afraid somehow and we're gonna talk about good girl, bad girl, right? Somehow there's something that seems wrong with that. Like we're serious, we're ambitious. I mean, I got that when I was young too. People would say,
Hmm.
"You're so," even when I was in graduate school, "You're so serious," as if that was a bad thing.
Bad
Would you
thing.
say that to a guy? And I would feel like, oh, yeah, I am kind of serious. Is that bad? I mean,
Hmm.
I thought it was good. I was working hard. But, I
Yeah.
think but I think we tend to be afraid of, like I said, of being big, of being assertive, of speaking our minds. And, we're so careful not to make any ripples. And we could go on and on about why that is. Well,
Hmm.
and we're afraid to, this, I go on and on about this. We are afraid to say, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good. That doesn't mean I don't want to be better,
Hmm.
but I'm good. And I
Hmm.
don't mean in some narcissistic, overblown way, but to own our competence. I say
Yeah.
this all the time to my clients who are, yeah, can you own your competence?
Love that. I love
Right?
that.
Right. And where do I want to go from here? So the example from an hour ago is a professional. She's in the horse industry. I've worked with her for at least 6 years. She has grown tremendously, personally and professionally. She has gone from sort of being a wannabe to being a player in
Hmm.
her discipline. She's got 2 farms.
Wow.
I mean, she's running a huge business now. She's still, she's aspiring. She's young. She's 35 or something,
Hmm.
right? And and she was just, and then today I said to her, because there was a peak thing that happened last week, and I sort of encouraged her to step back to have some perspective. And I said, do you do you see what you have accomplished over these last, and she can't, I mean, she's been working with me a lot. So she's like, well, mostly what I see is I didn't do this last week and I didn't do that. And, and she told me,
Hmm.
and I said, I'm going to be on this podcast in an hour, and Jessica is going to ask me why you are doing this. So I did. I said, I'm going to be on this podcast working on this. I won't name you, but I'd like you to answer the question, why are you diminishing yourself? And she thought about it, and she said, well, maybe I think that's motivating.
Oh.
And I said, well, I I said, you are such a motivated, driven, ambitious. I mean, this woman has ambition. I mean, I said, I'm having a hard time going with that. I hear
Hmm.
you, but I have a hard time believing that. And then we talked about, would it be possible to be good, to own, like I said a minute ago, your competence? Would it be possible to be in that place? I think it is, but
Hmm.
and also still be striving, but not
Hmm.
have to diminish yourself to then strive. And she said, yeah. I was like,
Good.
yeah. And then she had her reasons, we had to go on
Hmm.
with the
Yeah.
hour and work on it. But this is a pattern that I see with a lot of women, that somehow they have to diminish in order to, so this is hard to say, I'm still striving and I'm good now.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, I see that all the time. And so I challenge that a lot.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And some of it comes, some of where this comes is, people have trouble, women. I don't know if men do. I just don't work with that many men, a few, but not that many. Women seem embarrassed or ashamed of beginning or starting or being newer at something.
Hmm.
Certainly this woman, this client I was talking to, she had that. And so I challenge that. Well, wait a minute. There's shame in beginning or being new.
Hmm.
We all have to start, whether you're going to become a psychologist or a writer or a surgeon or an attorney or whatever you're going to be. We have to start.
Yeah.
Right? Do we criticize a 13-month-old for his walking when he falls? No, of course
Right.
not. Right? I mean, that's always an absurd example, but a lot of the people that I work with, they feel ashamed of being where they are,
Mm.
and that they're not somewhere else. Well,
Yeah.
but we can only be where we are. In 5 years, will you know more? Yeah, you will.
Hmm.
Yeah, but there's no shame in being where you are now. Everyone had to start their practice, right?
Yeah.
And I use myself as an example. You know, I was starting out. Do you remember your first clinical interviews? Like, oh man. Right? Right?
Flashback. Yeah, I know. I remember my first client and I think of that client very frequently. And I'm like, I hope I did not like mess her up.
Yeah. No, because yeah, when we're beginning, we're all heart, right? We're all
Mhm.
heart but yeah, right. So am I better at interviewing now? For sure. Absolutely.
Yes.
And but you know, you can't expect someone who's new to be that and we can't expect that of ourselves. So um anyhow, that's a little
Yeah.
bit of what I see. Yeah.
No, that was great. I wrote down own your competence because that's something I see as well. And I mean, I work primarily with teenagers, but especially my young female teens, like they oftentimes don't want to like own that they're good at something or compliment themselves or praise themselves because it's like, oh, I shouldn't. I hate the word should. I don't know if you that was
Oh,
drilled into you too. Yeah. Like like, oh, I shouldn't feel this way. Or like I don't want to come across I know you mentioned like narcissistic, or I don't want to come across as arrogant. Or like to your point, if a man was like, wow, I did that really well today, we wouldn't be like, oh, he's so narcissistic.
so I have a question for you because I work
Okay.
with a lot of teenagers too, and I see this exact thing. And this has been a pattern. I'm just shocked. So this is a situation, right? Happens over. We work on something, right? We work on something. It's usually, you know, anxiety or nerves in
Mm-hmm.
the show ring, in their performance. They work on it. They work hard on it. They go, they do the thing. They do it really well, right? They accomplish what they set out
Mm-hmm.
to do. Yay, right? And I say, are you proud of yourself? And they say, no, no, that would be cocky. I've had so
Mm-hmm.
many that no, that would be arrogant. And I challenge that too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds like you get the same thing. Like, wait a minute, you were struggling with this thing, and then we worked on it, and you worked on it, and you went and did the thing.
Mm-hmm.
But we can't say, I did a good job.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I see that a lot of times when I ask, like, are you proud of yourself? Like, and sometimes I'll get like, if it's like an academic thing, maybe they'll be like, yes, like I studied hard. But when it comes to like performance or things that they feel like if they admitted they were proud of themselves or they did a good job, like people would judge them or things like that. Yeah, the word cocky all the time. One thing I've started asking before getting into are you proud of yourself, because I've gotten that same response, is have you seen the progress you made, or can you identify the progress you have made? Because people are more willing to answer that question. Be like, "Oh yeah, like I did this, this, and this." And then, are you proud of yourself for that? Well, I could still be doing better or whatever
Yeah,
it is.
exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah,
And
right,
it's like,
right.
okay, well, we kind of almost got there. And you
Yeah,
could. And
and
like what I was hearing you say is like the both and. You can be good now and still want to do better or
right.
strive to do more.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm doing it still, right? Both
Hmm.
when I ride and also in my work, right? Every day I learn something. I hope to be better, right? Doesn't mean I'm not good now, but
Yeah.
we're really, I love this conversation because we're identifying the same thing we're seeing in our teenagers. I'm seeing in that 35-year-old I talked to you
Hmm.
about, right? And so right? Her inability to say, yeah, I did these last 6 months have been really tough. I can really see what I've accomplished and I'm
Hmm.
proud of myself. Is it
Yeah.
the end of the road? No way. I'm ambitious and right. So yeah, we got to work on this. We got
Hmm.
to,
Yeah. So
um,
on a similar vein, as we're talking about like accomplishments and being proud of ourselves, high achieving women also tend to minimize their successes, which we've kind of been talking about, and amplify their mistakes. So, can you talk a little bit more about the tendency that women have to do this? And really, more so, what is the impact of doing this on their overall well-being? You can even get into like performance, mental health, whatever the impact is that you see.
yeah. Well, in terms of being a performance psychologist and coach, this is really detrimental to
Hmm.
performance, right? So, but I see this all the time, right? If I'm helping somebody and they'll say, oh, if it's a teenager, you'll probably get this language. It was a tragedy. Right? It was a disaster. I
Yeah.
failed. I mean, using
Oh,
words really
failed. Uh-huh. Yeah.
really dramatic, right? Oh, it was, or she might say, well, it wasn't a tragedy, but I mean, and so, right? And then I'll ask them about it, and it turns out once we really talk about it and dive into it, and maybe I watch some videos, that there was an error, and it was this big.
Hmm.
95% of the performance was really
What?
spot on, was what they were working on. And yes, there was this. But if I let and then women do this too, and I didn't ask questions, you'd think it was a tragedy. You'd think they
Hmm.
went in there, fell out like it was bad, right? Right?
Yeah.
Right. So, well, first of all, this is a complete misrepresentation, right? They're
Hmm.
not. So, where do I want to go here? Um, uh, and the other thing that happens before I say where I want to go is that people will replay their mistakes over and over in the
Hmm.
right. And this is I think a natural human tendency. We tend to right
I would
focus
agree.
on what didn't go well. So it's partly men and women and everyone tends to do that. But in this performance setting, I find that athletes will often run over and over in their mind what they did wrong. And
Hmm.
what I say is not only does that bring you down and make you feel right, it's practicing your mistake.
Oh, that's a really
Right?
good point.
It's as if
Yeah.
visualization is a really important tool for a lot of us in this space, right? Very
Hmm.
powerful. But if you're running over it in your mind, the mistake, replaying it, watching it, that's the other thing, right? Watching it on your
Hmm.
video, kids do particularly, but some adults do too. You're basically practicing it.
Hmm.
So I got to get you to stop because what I need you to practice, I need you to learn from your mistake for sure.
Hmm.
What
Yeah.
happened? What did I do? What am I going to, but I want to hover on what am I going to do next time?
Yeah.
Right? Right. This is what I did and this is what I'm going to correct. But then if I'm going to hover on something or savor something, I have these different words, kind of like hover if I'm going to replay something over and over, I want it to be what went well, what I did
Hmm.
well, because that is practicing it, right? And what we think about, what we visualize, what we hover on is what expands,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And also it's in effect
Hmm.
practicing. So um, this is a very important principle when it comes to coaching doing performance coaching, right?
Yeah.
Um I don't know where you want to go from
Yeah.
there, but
No, no, I love that because I agree with you. I think it is human tendency to like hyper focus on our mistakes or replay them over and over again. But the way you just brought up, especially for in performance, by playing it over and over again, you're basically practicing the mistake. You're not moving towards those goals you have set for yourself. You're not enhancing your performance. And as you said, it's detrimental to their overall performance, which I'm implying you didn't explicitly say this, but if their performance is lowered or whatever, I don't know what
right.
term you want to use, is not up to where they want to be because they are focusing on the mistakes. I would imagine that's negatively going to impact their mental health further. They're going to be more anxious to perform, more depressed, more stressed, more overwhelmed. And
Absolutely.
you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, but those things alone, outside of the mistake, are probably going to negatively impact performance too.
Absolutely. Right, then they end up feeling down and feeling
Hmm.
like they can't get anything right and blah 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 blah, and that carries into the next performance. Right, and it also connects to resilience, right?
Hmm.
Because we could talk about so much, right? Because um, if you're feeling like in that state of oh, I'm a failure, it was a tragedy, right? You go into the next performance much more brittle, of
Hmm.
fearing mistakes rather than feeling empowered, right?
Yeah.
Right? And yeah, I mean, it definitely does not lead to bettering your performance. That leads to, right, a decline in performance and mental well-being,
Hmm.
right? So it's really important that we acknowledge what we have done well and replay
Hmm.
that, right? And
Yeah.
then correct in our minds what we want it to be and replay that, right?
Yeah.
And see our performance in a work. I always use this term. I want you to look at your performance in a workmanlike way, right? I want
Hmm.
to step back and have perspective rather than in such an emotional way. When a teenager tells me it was a tragedy, right? That's an emotional, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I always tease them. I say, well, it's not a tragedy unless you fell off before you got in the ring. That's a tragedy. But otherwise, right, most of the time,
Hmm.
it's not a tragedy. But we want to look at our performance in a more objective. I use the word workmanlike because I think
Hmm.
it's a little bit less um, has less valence to it. Like, oh, I want you to be workmanlike, right?
Hmm.
And then I use myself as an example. I say, Jessica, if you were teaching me, if you were going to coach me, I don't think you would say to me, Darby, that was a tragedy, right?
Yeah.
No, I would never say that to you, okay? Right? You'd say to me, "Oh, good job doing A,
Yeah.
B, and C. I love the way you corrected that at C. You really came through. You rose to the occasion. And for D, next time I think I'd like you to do a little more of X and Y, and
Hmm.
then that problem will be corrected." Something like that, right?
Yeah.
And then I feel like, "Oh, can I do that? Yeah, I can do that. I can do a little bit of more of X and Y at D. Yeah."
Hmm.
Uh, and that empowers me, right?
That's what I was just about to say. What you explained there goes back to what you said a few moments ago about going and feeling empowered versus fearful of making the mistake again. And, I obviously am not super familiar with the equestrian world, but I feel like this can apply to so many
Oh,
things. I mean, you said performance, and whether that's like um acting or sports or being a surgeon, you're performing, even like taking a test or giving a presentation in school, if all you're thinking about is like the mistakes you made on the last exam or the last uh, presentation you gave to your class, yeah, you're going to go in feeling much more anxious. So I love that you said, okay, A, B, and C, you did really well. D, let's try this next time, or, whatever it is, but finding like a solution or a plan for what to do different and that being it rather than replaying that mistake over and
right,
over and over again.
right. And it also hooks into perfectionism, I think,
I was going
right?
to talk to you about perfectionism, so this is perfect.
Because as you were talking, I was thinking, and I use this example with my clients and in my presentations, and this is real. Like if I'm giving a presentation or if I'm doing this podcast with you, and I start to get perfectionistic or overly critical, judgmental about
Mhm.
how I'm saying things or words I'm using, I can't even talk,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I suffocated, right?
Hmm.
So, um, uh, I need to be able to have, right? I need to be able to let my perfection, right? Not focus on mistakes,
Hmm.
focus on what I'm doing, being present, and not be so fearful of making mistakes. Because I think what I was riffing on was this fear of mistakes. If you go into any performance, whether that's your chemistry test or I mean, I use this with my kids all the time, right? No, when you go into your chemistry test, do you think about making mistakes? Hopefully not. Do you think
Yeah.
about, I want A? Hopefully not. You think about what you got to do. You've got to answer question one, and then you've got to move on to question two, right? You've
Hmm.
got to think about the thing, not be in a judgmental state, right? Which is, I'm bad at chemistry or whatever, right? You have to,
Hmm.
and so it connects to, anyway, what am I trying to say? Um, uh, I think the over focus on being perfect, right, is a judgmental state, right, where we
Yeah.
step out of our, and it really suffocates any sort of performance, whether you're a surgeon, you're giving a talk, or even I was giving a talk and to a bunch of writers, not writers, but writers, and they were talking about the same thing, right? That if they sit down to write a paragraph and they're worried about mistakes or they're worried about being perfect, they can't write at all,
hmm Yeah.
right?
You
Um,
freeze, basically.
right, right. So, and so, anyhow, it's so you're right. It relates to really any sort of performance, what we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, and continuing on the perfectionistic conversation, obviously we're talking about performance. High achieving women tend to also be very perfectionistic. And you just highlighted so many problems with being perfectionistic. The freeze response, really the anxiety about making mistakes. Um, have you seen in your work where perfectionism like really serves as a like protective pattern, or there are times that perfectionism can be helpful, or is it more so detrimental
Um,
across the board?
well, when you say a protective pattern, what do you did you have a thought about that? What you meant?
Like,
I'm curious.
so, high achieve going back to like what we were talking about earlier with, um, women not wanting to admit they're proud of themselves or things like that. Can perfectionism kind of protect them from that shame that you brought up, or um, the not wanting to come across as like narcissistic or things like that? Is there any protective means to just like trying to be perfect? Or do you feel like even if it's masking, in some ways, like some of those negative things, it's actually doing them harm? Does that make more
I think
sense?
so. I
Yeah.
think it's a really interesting question because you're leading me to think about it in even a different way.
Okay.
Because well, let me see if I can grab that thread because it's just a thread right now. That like I find that women often are they have they're ashamed of putting it all out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
That like in a performance, in any kind of performance, right? Of really putting it out there, like I'm going for it,
Yeah.
right? Because that feels vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
to say, I want this and I'm going for it. And I think they could hide behind the perfectionism. I'm not
Okay.
ready yet. I mean, how many women do you know? I was
Mm-hmm.
this too. Oh, I can't do that. I'm not ready yet. Maybe I need another degree. I need another
Mm-hmm.
certification. I need more classes. I'm not really right. That was somebody, and I have to say, my book is partly a book of mentoring, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of I'm hoping it helps mentor women to go out and do things
Do.
because I was hiding behind this mask of perfectionism. Oh, I'm not yet trained enough yet, or I'm not
Mm-hmm.
right because I didn't want to risk because I had all my reasons, right? I'm not good
Yeah.
enough yet. I'm not blah, blah, blah yet, right? So I think that's a really interesting idea, what you're offering up that there I was hiding behind my perfectionism. Like if I just got more perfect, right? If I
Mm-hmm.
just get more training, more experience, blah, blah, then I'll be okay. Then
Mm-hmm.
I'll be good enough, right? And I had a number of the mentoring part was I had a number of women in my life and a couple of men too who just pushed me off the diving board and was like no, go swim, you can swim, go do
Yeah.
it, right? And so that's a really interesting, I really love your point because usually what I say about perfectionism is it's good stuff, right? We
Mm-hmm.
don't get we high achievers don't get to be high achievers without being perfectionists,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's not a bad thing. It drives us, it keeps us, taking classes and learning. And I don't think, right, we wouldn't get ballerinas and surgeons and
Mm-hmm.
gymnasts and whatever without perfectionism. But it's when it gets to be in the red zone, as I always say, that it starts to really suffocate us, right? And get
Mm-hmm.
in the way when we can't allow ourselves to do the thing, right? Where we're so self-critical that we stop. Then we need to, then the red flag of perfectionism is raised and we need
Mm-hmm.
to that's when we need someone to push us off the diving board, like,
Yeah.
or challenge us, right?
Absolutely. And well,
So
and hearing you say that. And yes, like that's what I was wondering. Like, have you seen it like, stop people from, you know, trying the thing or okay, they're just going to continue getting the degree or getting more practice or things like that. But as I was hearing you talk, like even if they're like, "Oh, I'm doing this to be better," it seems like it's, "Oh, this is a good thing," but in reality, it's that's probably actually harming them at the same time because they're
Totally.
not actually going for the thing.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's a really, really good point. I'm going to noodle on that more with clients because, right, it keeps them out of doing the thing, right?
Hmm.
At a certain point, you've got to dive in and do the thing, right?
Hmm.
And if you're making excuse, right, if you're hiding behind, oh, I just have to be a little bit more perfect, then yeah, then there's the
Yeah.
red flag of perfectionism there too.
Yeah.
So that's a really I mean that's true with writer's block, right? That a great
Hmm.
example of
Yeah.
that would be writer's block and right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks for that. Yeah.
No problem. So I'm going to circle back to something you briefly, very briefly mentioned earlier in our conversation, but I know you also talk about it in your book, which is this good girl mentality. And we've been talking about being good a lot in this conversation. So can you share about what this good girl mentality is and how that shows up in high achieving women, whether they're teenagers, 35-year-olds, 50-year-olds?
Yeah. Well, I think the good girl mentality, as I was mentioning earlier, is um ingrained in a lot of us. It's right. It's a really a female pattern of, well, don't make waves, make
Mhm.
everything easy for everyone, put other people first, and even back in the old days, right? Don't speak until you're spoken to, kind of
Hmm.
right? But it really, to me, what I see is, don't make waves, don't ask for the better table at the restaurant, don't send you, I mean, little things like that, right?
Hmm.
Don't create any ripples. Don't be critical. Don't say what you think.
Hmm.
Right. And I think in general, men are freer to say what they think. If we say what we think, we can be labeled bad words, bad
Yep,
things. Right? Um,
absolutely.
or we can be called, aggressive, as if aggressive is a bad thing. Right. So I think it's conditioned, culturally
Hmm.
conditioned, right? That's no really new news. How it shows up in high achieving women. I mean, what I always remark about is I mean, and I work with women, just to be clear, so, some of the women that I work with are writers and they're high level writers, but they're also executive CEOs and
Hmm.
executives, right? So um, very accomplished people in many realms. And what I'll see in these very accomplished women is still this fear of disrupting, right? Of not making waves, right?
Yeah.
Still this hesitancy to say what they really mean, or just to be overly nice, or to confuse assertiveness with niceness, right? Or
Hmm.
clarity with niceness. Be a nice girl doesn't really say what she thinks, I
Yeah.
guess. So that's what's been interesting, because you think that, and not across the board. I mean, a lot of high achieving women they have tackled this
Hmm.
conflict, and maybe not mastered it, but tackled it. But I see it a lot, right? And it's part of
Hmm.
what my function as in working with them is to take a little note when we see them diminish themselves or quiet themselves in some way that is not serving them,
Yeah. Well,
right?
and I think I mean, ties in a lot of what we've talked about, but it shows us how messages we receive when we're young carry with us throughout our lives, no matter how successful we become. Like you were just saying, executives, CEOs, like those messages that we received early on from society, from family, unless you're actively doing work to challenge, change, deconstruct, whatever word you want to use, you can be the most successful person in the world, but those messages are still going to stick if you haven't. identified them, identify where they come from, and then
Yeah.
work to challenge them and,
Yeah.
take the own your competence. I'm gonna steal that from you. I love that
Yeah. Oh, you can
line.
please take it. No, absolutely. I have a woman who comes to mind who has a big deal job. Let's just say that,
Okay.
and her feedback, and the her superior's feedback to her has been, "We want to hear more of you. We want to hear more of you, right? We need you to."
Hmm.
And she's at a very high level, and she's really struggled with that. We've really worked on her owning her voice
Yeah.
but for her it's been a real conflict about how could she give her an opinion, how could she see herself on the same level as these other executives, that her voice can be on the table too.
Mm.
It's been a real struggle for her. And she's getting there though. She's getting
Yeah.
there. Right. And that it would also, her conflict showed in the competitive equestrian arena, where she did it all, she set it all up, right? Got the right
Hmm.
horse, the right training, the whole thing,
Hmm.
and then would go in the ring and shrink, literally. Well, I don't
Yeah.
belong in there. I don't
Yeah.
belong in there. She wouldn't buy herself the right clothes. She could, right? When you compete in any arena, right? You got to have the right gear. You got to look
Yeah.
the part. You got to, right? Oh, I'm not going to buy the right clothes because I'm not there yet. And even though she had set herself up, anyway, you could just see the conflict.
Hmm.
She's doing great now, which is
That's
good.
awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I'm really proud of her. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
and hopefully she is proud of herself too, right? Going back to
Is proud of herself.
good. Good.
And it's interesting. She's a great example of owning her identity. Like, it
Mm.
was hard for her to own her identity as an executive in this company, or own the identity of being a competitive equestrian.
Hmm.
She's an amazing athlete. She's a very competitive runner as well. But she
Wow.
did own that identity. She just said, "Oh, I just run." Well,
Okay.
but it's different if you identify as a runner,
Hmm.
or you just say, "Oh, I just run." No, it
Hmm.
feels completely different.
Yeah.
If I am a runner, then right, I'm a part of a community, I'm part of a group, I'm owning my competitiveness. Yes, I run, I race. She's a competitive runner, right?
Hmm.
It's that it gets. We could take this conversation into that realm too, like owning, like stepping in, what it means to own this identity
Hmm.
of whatever it is, right? She was delegitimizing herself in so many areas of her life.
Hmm.
It was wonderful because it was such a clear pattern. Took us a couple of years to get through, but to me, it's like, wow, we're doing this everywhere.
Yeah.
Delegitimizing, not owning who she really was and wanted to be, you know?
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. Well, so on that vein, because I know we're getting towards the end, you've said own your competence, own your identity. You gave us that great tip about, identifying, focusing on the positive, identifying the mistake you made and just kind of what you can do better. Are there other practical tips? I know there's probably plenty, but that you want to share that high achieving women can start implementing in their lives to either challenge that self-critical voice, that good girl mentality, any other things that we've talked about through this discussion.
well, I think the first part is always noticing.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
If you know you're really self-critical, and you have to be able to notice, right, in order to
Yeah.
step out of it. And so that's where I start with so many people, right? Because I notice the judgment. Say a new client's working with me, and I will notice the incredibly harsh self-judgment, and even the words sometimes they'll use to describe themselves. Even
Hmm.
that one client that I talked to you about that I saw an hour or 2 hours ago now, and we've been working a long time. She said something about in my dumb mind. She said, and then she stopped. She said, "No." She said, "I'm not going to use that word." She said,
Okay.
I am in no part dumb."
Oh,
She said, "I'm going to
wow.
rephrase that," which is true. She's
Yeah.
brilliant, right? I
Yeah.
thought, touchdown. There we go. Yeah, exactly. So, but there was a great example of her listening to herself, her self-talk, which
Hmm.
was so brutal, stopping it, right? And changing it. But the first step is observing, right? Because
Yeah.
if you can't observe it, then right? You don't have a chance at changing.
Yeah.
So that would be my first, like if you notice that you're super critical and you're right, just watch, maybe just for half a day or a couple
Hmm.
hours. Listen to the voice you use with yourself.
Yeah.
And you can ask yourself, would you use that with a colleague or a
Hmm.
student or someone you were mentoring? And if not, red flag it,
Yeah.
right? Because how we speak to ourselves, it matters,
It does.
right? It matters, right? And I mean, Jessica, you and I could keep going on and we could go into compassion here. We could go on for
Hmm.
hours, but we have to let your listeners go. But that's my biggest first tip is to
Yeah.
listen and then try to intervene with how you speak to yourself. But you got to listen first.
Yeah. No, I love that. I tell my clients all the time, regardless of the situation, like awareness is the first step. If you're not aware of whatever it is, like you're never going to be able to change it or even recognize it's something that needs to be
Right,
changed.
right,
So,
right.
but I love that, like how you said, just even half a day. I like to use the term like take inventory. Take inventory
Yes,
of how often you're
right.
speaking negatively to yourself because I think a lot of, especially women, we do it and don't even realize because it's so like what second nature is that the
Yeah,
right
it's
term to use?
habitual. Right.
Like we're
Yeah.
just so used to it.
Hmm.
So like we don't even think like,
That's
oh, maybe this is something I should probably address. I use the word should, I hate the word should, but like this is
right.
something
Maybe I
that needs
might want
addressing.
to challenge this. Right.
Hmm.
No. And
Yeah.
that's really a great, a huge function of psychotherapy, right? And in fact, I always say, as soon as someone reaches out or start, as soon as they reach out, they start to observe themselves in a different
Hmm.
way, right? The
Yeah.
change already starts as soon as you even probably are thinking about reaching out because you start to observe yourself. And that's opening the door. Now we can walk through the door. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Darby, I have enjoyed this discussion so much, and I agree. Like, we could talk for
Yeah.
hours upon hours. And so, as we're wrapping up, is there anything I haven't asked you about that you want to touch on or want to leave the listeners with, or feel like is really important to add to the discussion we've already had?
Well, I will just say that my book, Unshrinkable, is
Hmm.
a book of mentoring. It's a large part of what I've always done in my work, even, when I was teaching. And the book so it's an offering. So
Hmm.
I hope it mentors lots of women. It's an expression of it, or it's a product of many people mentoring me. And
Hmm.
so I also want it to be a call to action. Like we can mentor each other and we need to. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's a very small act of reminding someone of what she can do.
Hmm.
Or, I mean, I have some great examples in the book of small moments of mentoring, either to me or from me to someone else. And so I just like to put a pitch on that. Like, all of us women, we need to help each other out. We need
Hmm.
to be in community. Sometimes we're in competition, but we're also in community. And, when we lift each other up, we are also lifted up. So I hope this book helps lift up women, and I hope other women who read it will lift up their friends and colleagues and strangers.
Yeah.
Um,
I love that. So, on that note, where can people connect with you and buy your book?
well, my professional website is darbybonomi.com, my name, and I can be reached there. I'm on social media also on Instagram and Facebook, LinkedIn. You can find me, and my book is available you can find it on Amazon. You can go to the book website, which is unshrinkable.book.com. And there you can buy it on Amazon through there, or you can buy it through independent booksellers, which I'd like to put a little pitch for that because we want to
Hmm.
also support our independent booksellers. It's also available on Kindle and it's an audiobook. So if you want it, you can find it. Yeah.
Wonderful. And I will link all of that in the show notes of this episode so the listeners have easy access to your website, your social media, your book, everything. So, Darby, thank you once again for coming on for having this discussion. It was great, lovely. It made me think of things I can help my clients with, but also help myself with. So I just appreciate your knowledge, insights, and taking time out of your schedule to come chat with me today.
Oh, well, this was so fun and I'm so grateful. Thank you for having me on, and I look forward to continuing to connect with you. Yeah.
Thank you, the listeners, for joining for today's episode of Psych Talk, and I will catch you in the next episode. Bye. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Psych Talk. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the show. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend. Don't forget to follow me on all socials at Jessica Lee, PhD, and the podcast at Psych Talk Podcast on Instagram.